If you're new to Blender and you're just starting to make animations, you're probably rendering them wrong. I'm going to show you the proper workflow to take your animations and render them out into videos. And if you don't know how to animate at all, look at my Exploded View animation tutorial, links in the description. This is the animation that we made in that video. I've made some slight changes, but you can use your own as well if you want. So, the first thing we're going to do, we are going to go into the Output tab over here. Under the Format tab, we're going to check the resolution. Now, usually 1920 by 1080 is what a lot of monitors and a lot of YouTube videos display, so most of the time you'll be doing that. If you want it in 4K, you can just double that. You can double both of them. So it is 3840 by 2160, but we're going to render it in essentially 2K here, or well 1080p, just to reduce the render time. Then the next thing we're going to look at is the frame rate. We're rendering this one in 60 FPS. Then after that, it's the frame range. So if I come out onto my layout tab here, you can see that in the video we made the animation 240 frames long. So we're making sure that what we're actually going to render is from frame 1 to frame 240. Keep step at 1. You can increase it. That essentially means you're skipping frames. So if you want to change the frame rate to say 30, you can lower it there. But what we're going to do is we're just going to keep it at 1 so that we're not missing any frames. Then what we're going to do is we're going to look at the Output tab, and you can see here it's defaults to this /temp, and that's your Windows temp directory. You can change it to something else if you want, but for me, just keeping it in here, especially if you're not making many animations, you're not making any at the same time, keeping them in the temp directory is usually fine. So, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the file format here. Now, you might be tempted to set this to FFmpeg video because, oh, I'm making a video. Don't do that. Bad idea. The reason for that is because you're rendering everything out to one file, and if something goes wrong, especially if you've got a long animation, if something gets corrupted, or even if you just want to make some slight changes to some of the scenes and you only want to change some of the frames, you've got to re-render the entire thing. If you're making very long animations, especially at 60 FPS with the Cycles render engine with some fancy lighting and that kind of thing, it can take hours. And if you don't want to get halfway through your render and then your computer crashes or there's a power outage or something like that, and then it's all corrupted. So do them to individual images. That means if something goes wrong, you've still got half your animation done. And then later on in the video, we are going to take all those frames, put them all together into one animation, all within Blender. You don't need any other software for this, so stay tuned for that. So, making sure we've got that set to PNG, or some other image. I usually use PNG. We're going to set the color depth to RGB. RGBA means there's an alpha channel, which basically means there's transparency, which PNG supports, but we're making a video, so we don't need that. Then we're going to set the color depth to 16. This means essentially you get more vibrant colours, or you get less blocky colours. So just set it to 16. Compression usually defaults 15%. That's generally fine. Unless you're making very low light animations or low light videos, then I'd maybe lower it a bit so that the colour depth doesn't get blocky. Now, under colour management, we're going to set it to follow scene. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go into the render tab under here, and all the way to the bottom, we have color management. Right, I'm going to show you this in the rendered view. So generally, sRGB is what you want here. And then the view transform, I usually set it to Filmic. There's a lot of these other ones, but Filmic works for me the best, I think. Then under this, you can select the look. I quite like medium high contrast, but I'm going to show you some of the different options. So very low contrast, as it says in the tin, very low contrast. There's also very high contrast, which makes everything really pop out. But I feel that's probably a little bit too much. So I usually set mine to medium high contrast. That's what I quite like. Now you can play about with what other options you want, but I just stick to medium high contrast and then leave all the rest of the settings as they are. Just make sure this is also sRGB. So now we're going to go to the top of this tab, and for this we're going to use Cycles to render. You can use Eevee, that's the other render engine that Blender has. But obviously you can see here the lighting is just not set up for it at the moment because I've rendered this whole thing in Cycles, so it looks a bit weird. So we're going to go back to Cycles. We're going to set it to GPU compute. You don't want it on CPU. If you've got a graphics card, just set it to GPU. It's a lot faster. So the next setting we're going to do, we're going to close this viewport 1. We are going to go to the render settings here. We are going to turn on denoise, and you can just copy my settings here. We're going to turn on use GPU as well. And essentially the only thing you really want to change here is the max samples. Because if you're on a lower end spec, lower end PC, you might want to turn that down to say 64. But for me, I found that 256 is generally quite good, especially with the noise settings I've got here. Now, if you don't use denoise, I'm going to show you in the viewport here. Everything looks quite jittery, I guess. It's kind of hard to describe. Well, noisy is the best way to use it. And your renders low like that, a lot of people don't know about the denoise features Blender has, just turn it on and set the noise threshold to 0.03 is what works for me the best. If you're getting some view artifacts, if you're getting some kind of weird lighting, one of the things you can do under light paths and the max bounces, you can turn these up. Now, sometimes, especially if you've got glass in a render, sometimes you can, I think transmission defaults to like 2, so that means the glass looks really weird, so you might want to turn that up quite a bit, and that'll just make anything that's transparent or translucent look quite a lot better. Also, if you've got anything that is glassy or even like water, you might want to turn on reflective and refractive caustics, but we don't have anything transparent, so we're just going to leave that off for now. Also, under film settings, if you've got any transparency, you can just turn on transparent here and transparent glass. That essentially means if you're making renders, this is what you'd use for if you're making PNGs. Like I said, back then I had the A channel or the alpha channel. I don't know if you've seen in PNGs before, you get this checkered pattern. This comes through in your render, so you can say you're making something for backgrounds for like a presentation or whatever, you just get the actual object and you don't get the background, and you can put that directly on top of your designs. So we don't need that, so we're going to turn it back off here. And now that's all the settings we need. We're just going to double check this is PNG, and then we're just going to hit render animation. Zoom it a wee bit, and it's just going to start rendering through all the scenes. It's going to start rendering through all the frames, and like I said, it's just dumping it in the temp directory here. And you can see it's just going to keep adding these like that. Just while this renders, if you're an engineer like me and you're interested in Blender, go to the top link in the description and have a look at my course and community, Blender for Engineers. I think you'll really like it. So I'm just going to let this render out. Okay, so now this is done rendering. We've got all our frames here from frame 1 to frame 240. So now we can go into Blender and safely save and close this. But what we're actually going to do, we're going to go into New, go to Video Editing here. Right, and we've got this new workspace here. So what we're going to do, we're going to go Add Image Sequence. We are going to navigate to C, we're going to go Temp, and then we're just going to select all of these. Set the name, set this organized by name, just so it comes through in the right order. So 1's at the top, select 1, scroll all the way at the bottom, Shift Select 240, Add Image Strip. Now you can change the actual length of this animation here, and it's some of the same settings as before, so we're going to set this to 240, and the frame rate to 60 FPS. And make sure the resolution is the same as the animation. So now that that's set up, we just go to Output. Now we can set it to FFmpeg video, because we already have the frames, and because it's rendering directly from images instead of rendering the entire scene every time, it's going to be a lot faster, and we can just render it straight from these images into the video. So just make sure the color management is follow scene. Encoding, you can leave all these settings as they are, and we're just going to go up to the top again, and we're going to hit render animation. And now you see it's running a lot faster. So I'm just going to let this render out. Okay, now that's done, you come over here to the temp, and there we have it. Here's our animation. So one of the good things you can use the Blender composite, or the Blender video tools for, you can make separate scenes if you want. So you can say, let's add, go into the add image sequence here. We can add from frame 1 to 120. Oh, actually just selected that wrong. Just add them back in. And then if we go here, we can add frame 121. Well, actually I'm going to select this. Yep. Image sequence, frame 121 to 240. And there we go. So now, because these are two separate scenes, effectively, they're two separate image sequences, you can have this scene stay the same, and essentially you can say re-import this one if you want to re-render the second half of the animation, or if you've got an animation with separate scenes, like separate camera cuts and that kind of thing, you can render them out separately and have them even in different files. And essentially when you re-render the actual images, this will automatically update, and say like you like one scene, but with another scene you decide, oh, maybe I want to change the lighting on this a little bit, you can re-render them out, and because it's all images, it'll automatically update. So that's the proper way to render out your animations in Blender. Like I said, if you don't know how to animate at all, go ahead and check out my exploded view animation tutorial. Like I said, this whole workflow is also covered in more detail in Blender for Engineers, along with a whole host of other things. So if you like this video, if you found it helpful, I think that you'd really, really like that. So go check it out, it's the top link in the description.